All right, so strap yourselves in, folks, because today we're going deep on this proposed build-to-rent bill. I mean, you've been looking into Australia's housing affordability crisis, and it seems like this thing has everyone talking. We've got, well, a ton of info to sift through, news articles, surveys, even some pretty strong opinions from the pollies, and, well, things are getting kind of heated, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pressure cooker at the moment, isn't it? Public anxiety, political maneuvering, the whole economic reality, it's all kind of swirling around together. Should be pretty interesting to see what comes out of it.
Well, let's stoke the fire and see what's cooking, eh? First things first, how worried are Australians about finding a decent place to live these days?
Well, right now, housing affordability is actually the second biggest concern for Australians, just behind, the always rising cost of living. And it's not just like a theoretical worry either. Almost 3 out of 5 Australians are renting simply because they feel like they've got no other option. Owning a home is starting to feel like a distant dream for a lot of people.
Right, so that's the backdrop. And then in comes this build to rent bill, which some are saying could be a solution. What's the main idea behind it?
Well, the bill is trying to encourage construction of rental properties, specifically designed for long-term living. Think like entire apartment complexes professionally managed, amenities, a real focus on stability. It's a model that's worked pretty well in other parts of the world.
And you mentioned there are some interesting alliances forming around this bill. What's going on there?
You've got community-backed independents like Senator David Pocock and Senator Jackie Lambie, and they're teaming up with, big industry players like the Property Council. It's a pretty clear sign this issue is cutting across those usual party lines.
Right, but it's not just the politicians and industry folks who are riled up about this, right? What's the general public feeling?
Public support is actually pretty strong, even among voters who, usually lean towards the Greens or the coalition. A recent poll actually found that a majority of Australians back a joint proposal. For amendments to the bill put forward by the Community Housing Industry Association, that's CHIA, National Shelter, and even the Property Council.
Okay, so what are these amendments that have got everyone buzzing? What's got everyone so worked up?
Well, the amendments are focusing on two main things: protecting renters' rights and making sure a decent chunk of these new developments include affordable housing options. It's about making sure build-to-rent doesn't just mean more housing, but better housing. Housing that people can actually afford and feel secure in.
That sounds appealing to anyone who's ever had a nightmare landlord or, well, struggled to make rent. But I'm guessing these amendments aren't exactly free.
You're right, there is a price tag attached. An analysis by EY estimated that implementing these amendments would cost about $980 per new build-to-rent home each year over 10 years. So whether or not that's a worthwhile investment, well, that's the million-dollar question.
Or, well, in this case, the multi-million-dollar question.
Mm.
Well, from the sound of things, the independents backing this bill seem pretty convinced it's worth it. They're not exactly known for mincing words.
Oh, absolutely not. They're practically shouting from the rooftops about this housing crisis reaching a breaking point. Their message is pretty clear. Stop the political games and get this bill passed. Senator Pocock, for example, is urging everyone to listen to what the people are demanding. And the polls, well, they suggest that what they're demanding is action on affordable housing.
Right, and what about politicians who have actually seen build-to-rent projects succeed in their own districts, like Kate Cheney?
Cheney actually points to a development in Subiaco. It's been pretty much full since it opened back in 2019. And her point is, this isn't just some theoretical idea. It actually works. Now it's time to, well, scale it up.
Yeah.
And stop dragging our feet.
Senator Lambie's even called out Australian super funds for investing in rent-to-buy schemes overseas, but not here at home. What's her take on all this?
Well, she's frustrated, to say the least. Lambie sees it as a missed opportunity to use those existing resources to tackle the housing shortage, especially with the clock ticking down on this year's legislative session. There's a real sense of urgency there.
Yeah, and it seems like that feeling's shared by others, like Monique Ryan, who's not shying away from, well, pointing fingers at past inaction.
You're right. Dr. Ryan is calling out like decades of drop balls from both major parties, saying their lack of planning has led us straight to this crisis. She sees the build-to-rent bill as, well, crucial, but she's adamant that we need to be pulling every lever available to really make a dent in this problem.
Right. Allegra Spender and Kylie Tink seem to be singing from the same hymn sheet, too, emphasizing those long-term solutions and putting an end to all this political point scoring.
Absolutely. Their argument is pretty simple. Building more houses is the only way to address the root cause of this mess. And build-to-rent is, a key part of that equation.
Yeah.
They're fed up with the political roadblocks. And they're demanding action, not just empty promises or, partisan bickering.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got a picture of just how worried Australians are about housing, the potential of this build-to-rent bill, the odd bedfellows supporting it, and the really impassioned pleas from independent politicians demanding immediate action. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
I can see the wheels turning. What's caught your attention?
well, we've talked up the potential upside of this bill,
Yeah.
especially for renters. But what about the flip side? Are there any potential downsides or unintended consequences lurking in the shadows that we should be considering?
Now, that's the kind of critical thinking that makes this deep dive worthwhile. We're not just here to cheerlead, we're here to get to the heart of the matter. And yeah, there are definitely some potential downsides we need to unpack. We'll dig into those and, weigh them against the potential benefits in our next segment.
Okay, sounds like we've got some serious unpacking to do. This is where things could get really interesting. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a quick break.
See you soon. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement when a potential solution like this build-to-rent bill comes along. But just like, any major policy shift, I think we've got to consider the potential downsides. And of course, those unintended consequences. There's always the risk that things won't play out exactly as planned.
And that's what makes this deep dive so important, right? We're not just skimming the surface here. We're digging into the nitty-gritty. So let's put on our skeptics' hats for a second. What are some of those potential downsides we should be wary of?
Well, one concern is that this laser focus on build-to-rent might actually pull resources and attention away from other critical aspects of the housing crisis. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
So what else should be on the table alongside this bill? What are we potentially missing?
Well, we can't forget about increasing the supply of social and affordable housing options, helping first-time homebuyers get their foot in the door, and tackling, those broader economic factors that are driving up housing costs in the first place. Build-to-rent is a promising piece of the puzzle, for sure. But it's not a cure-all.
Right. It's about making sure we're not neglecting those who need help the most. Yeah. Keeping that balance in mind.
Exactly. Another potential pitfall is that if we're not careful with how we implement build-to-rent, it could actually end up concentrating housing ownership even more in the hands of those big institutional investors.
So instead of spreading the wealth and opportunity, we could end up with a system where everyday Australians are essentially shut out of the housing market entirely.
That's the worry. We need to make sure that build-to-rent developments are, well, designed and regulated in a way that benefits both renters and, of course, the community as a whole.
Which brings us back to those amendments we talked about earlier, the ones focused on renter protections and affordable housing components. They seem, well, pretty crucial to avoid those unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Those amendments are key to ensuring that build-to-rent contributes to a fairer and more sustainable housing market, not one that just benefits those who are already well off.
Okay, so we've got the issue of balance and potential concentration of ownership. What about the impact on existing communities? Some people worry that these large-scale developments could lead to gentrification and, well, displacement of longtime residents.
That's a valid concern, yeah. And it underscores the need for, careful planning and genuine community engagement. Build-to-rent projects need to be, I think, thoughtfully integrated into existing neighborhoods, not just plopped down without considering the people who already live there.
So it's a tightrope walk, trying to boost housing supply without disrupting communities, and that delicate balance of the market.
You could say that. There are no easy answers here.
And that's exactly why we're having this deep dive. It's about gaining a nuanced understanding, weighing the pros and cons, and ultimately forming our own informed opinions.
Exactly. We're not here to hand you a prepackaged opinion. We're giving you the tools to, think critically and draw your own conclusions. And remember, even the most well-intentioned policies can have unforeseen consequences. It's our responsibility as engaged citizens to stay informed, ask the tough questions, and hold our policymakers accountable.
Speaking of policymakers, we've heard a lot from the independent voices championing this bill. But what about the major parties? What are the Greens and the coalitions saying about all this?
That's where things get even more interesting, I think. The Greens have voiced some reservations, mainly about ensuring enough genuinely affordable housing and, well, preventing corporations from simply pocketing profits without giving back to the community.
And where do the coalitions stand?
Their position is, I say, a bit more ambiguous. Some members like the idea of build-to-rent, but they worry about, costs and potential market distortions. They're calling for a cautious approach.
So it sounds like there's still a lot of political wrangling ahead before this bill has any chance of becoming law.
Oh, absolutely. This is where those political realities we talked about earlier really come into play.
Hmm.
It's a high-stakes game. And the fate of this bill hinges on whether the different parties can, well, find some common ground and hammer out a compromise that addresses everyone's concerns.
It feels like we're watching a political chess match unfold, with each move having these huge implications for the future of housing in Australia. What are the key pressure points that could make or break this bill's success?
Well, one major sticking point is likely to be the level of government funding and tax incentives offered to build-to-rent developers. The Greens, for instance, might demand stricter affordability requirements in exchange for their support.
Okay, and what about the coalition? What concessions are they likely to push for?
Well, they might focus on limiting government involvement in the market, advocating for less red tape, and, a faster, more streamlined approval process for these development.
It seems like finding that sweet spot, that delicate balance between encouraging development and protecting the interests of both renters and the community as a whole, well, that's going to be the key to getting this bill across the finish line.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not just about appeasing different political groups. It's about finding a solution that actually delivers tangible results for the people who are struggling the most.
Which leads to another, I think, crucial question. Even if this bill does manage to pass all the hurdles, how long will it realistically take to see a real impact on the housing market? Are we talking months, years, decades?
Well, this is where we need to manage expectations a bit. Building new housing takes time, even with, the best intentions and a smooth legislative process. We're talking years, not a quick fix.
So while this bill could be a major step in the right direction, it's not a magic wand that's going to solve the housing crisis overnight. It's more of a long-term strategy, one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to, to look beyond the immediate political battles and consider the bigger picture. This build-to-rent debate highlights a fundamental challenge. I mean, it's facing societies all over the world, how to create a housing market that is both fair and sustainable in the long run.
Okay, I'm ready for the bigger picture. What are the key elements of this global housing challenge that we need to be grappling with?
Well, we're facing a perfect storm of issues: rising inequality, rapid urbanization, climate change, and shifting demographics. All these forces are putting immense pressure on housing markets, making affordability and access a growing concern in cities around the globe, not just in Australia.
It's like we're at a crossroads, forced to rethink how we approach housing in the 21st century. The old models just aren't cutting it anymore.
You're absolutely right. We need to move beyond those traditional models and embrace, innovative solutions that address the root causes of the housing crisis, not just put bandages on the symptoms. It's time to think outside the box.
So it's not just about building more houses, it's about building better houses in smarter ways and making sure everyone has access to, safe, affordable, and sustainable housing options.
Precisely. And that requires, I think, a fundamental shift in our mindset. We need to stop viewing housing primarily as an investment and start recognizing its vital role as a social good, something that's essential for human well-being and, well, a thriving society.
That's a powerful statement. It really makes you think about the values we prioritize as a society. Are we prioritizing profit over people? Short-term gains over long-term sustainability? Are we really serving the needs of our communities?
Those are the tough questions we need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
And the answers, well, they'll shape the future of housing, not just in Australia, but around the world. It's a global conversation that we all need to be a part of.
This deep dive has been, well, eye-opening, to say the least. What are some of the key takeaways you hope our listener is absorbing from all this?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they understand that the housing crisis is a complex issue, and there are no easy answers. It requires, I think, a nuanced understanding of the many factors at play and a willingness to consider different perspectives. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
And what about the role of individual citizens in this debate? What can they do to make their voices heard and contribute to positive change? It can feel overwhelming to know where to even start.
That's a crucial point, yeah. This isn't just an issue for politicians and policymakers to grapple with. It's something that affects all of us, and we all have a role to play in shaping the future of housing in our communities.
So what does that look like in practice? How can we move beyond feeling overwhelmed and actually take action?
Well, it starts with staying informed and engaging in, constructive conversations. Reach out to your elected officials, share your concerns, and advocate for policies that align with your values. Support organizations working to address housing affordability and homelessness. There's power in numbers. and your voice matters.
And on a more personal level, what can we do in our own lives to make a difference?
Think critically about your own housing choices and consumption patterns. Are you making decisions that contribute to a more equitable and sustainable housing market? Or are you inadvertently, perpetuating the problems? Every choice we make has an impact.
I love that. It's about recognizing our individual agency and understanding that even small actions can ripple outwards and create positive change.
Precisely. And never underestimate the power of collective action. When we raise our voices together and demand better, we can drive meaningful change.
This has been an incredible deep dive, but I feel like we're only just scratching the surface of this complex and multifaceted issue. Before we wrap up this part of our discussion, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any final words of wisdom to leave our listener with?
Just this. The housing crisis is a solvable problem, but it requires bold thinking, collaborative action, and I think a fundamental shift in our priorities.
Right.
It's time to move beyond the status quo and envision a future where everyone has access to, safe, affordable, and sustainable housing. We have the resources and the ingenuity to make it happen. But it's up to us to demand better and work together to build that future.
Well said. Now, before we move on to our final segment, I want to leave our listener with a thought-provoking question to ponder, something to really chew on.
I'm all ears. What have you got?
So if we actually believe that everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to call home, like if that's truly a fundamental human right, what are we actually willing to do to make that a reality as individuals, as communities, as a nation? I mean, it's a question that goes beyond just policies and politics, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's about our values and, well, our shared humanity.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful question to sit with. I think it really speaks to the heart of this whole conversation. It challenges us to move beyond just acknowledging the problem and start, envisioning solutions.
Right. And throughout this deep dive, we've talked about the complexities of this housing crisis, the potential of this build-to-rent bill, and, well, the need for a bigger shift in our thinking about housing, thinking of it as a social good. But I'm curious, what role could technology play in all of this? Could it be part of the solution?
It's pretty fascinating to consider the possibilities, isn't it? Technology has the potential to completely revolutionize how we design, build, and even manage housing. I mean, we're already seeing some amazing innovations in areas like prefabrication, 3D printing, even smart home technologies, all of which could make construction faster, more efficient, and of course, more affordable.
So instead of those, like, super drawn-out construction projects we're used to, we could see homes being built more like cars on a production line with, pre-assembled components that can be quickly and easily put together on site.
Exactly. Imagine entire apartment buildings being built off-site and then just transported and assembled in a matter of weeks, not years.
Yeah.
I mean, that could dramatically reduce construction time and labor costs, which could lead to, more affordable housing options.
And what about 3D printing? I've seen some, well, mind-blowing examples of houses being printed using those massive 3D printers. Is that something that could actually become more common in the future?
It's certainly not out of the question. 3D printing offers some incredible design flexibility and customization. And it has the potential to be a real game changer in terms of affordability, especially for meeting, those unique housing needs and adapting to different environments.
Yeah, I'm also really interested in the potential of smart home technology to make our homes, well, more energy efficient and sustainable. Could we be living in homes that are not only affordable, but also environmentally responsible?
Absolutely. Imagine homes that can, intelligently monitor and adjust their energy consumption in real time, optimizing for both comfort and efficiency, while minimizing their impact on the environment. We're talking about homes that can learn your habits and preferences, anticipate your needs, make life easier and more sustainable.
That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But we got to be realistic, right? Technology isn't a magic bullet. There are potential downsides and, well, ethical considerations to think about.
Of course. Technology is a tool. And like any powerful tool, it can be used for good or, for bad. It's really crucial to make sure these innovations are implemented responsibly and ethically, with a focus on inclusivity and accessibility. We don't want to create a future where, only the wealthy can afford those smart, sustainable homes. And that just further widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Right. That's such an important point. It's about using technology to empower everyone, not just a select few. We need to make sure that these advancements benefit all members of society, not just those who can afford the latest gadgets.
Exactly. It's about using technology to level the playing field, not create new barriers. And that requires careful planning, thoughtful regulation, and, well, I think ongoing dialogue to make sure these technologies are serving the greater good.
Well, it seems like we're standing on the brink of a really transformative era in housing, with technology playing this, this pivotal role in shaping the future. But as we've discussed throughout this deep dive, it's not just about the technology. It's about our values, our priorities, and the kind of world we want to live in. Technology is just a tool to help us achieve that vision.
Couldn't agree more. The future of housing is ultimately in our hands. It depends on our collective vision, our willingness to embrace innovation, and our commitment to creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
That's a powerful and an inspiring message to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's been an incredible journey, and I feel like we've only just begun to explore this, this vast and multifaceted world of housing.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, this conversation doesn't end here. Let's keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep working together to build a better future. One home, one community, one innovation at a time.
And to you, dear listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration has, well, sparked your curiosity, challenged your assumptions, and given you a fresh perspective on this complex housing crisis. Now, armed with knowledge and a renewed sense of purpose, we encourage you to continue the conversation in your own communities. The future of housing isn't predetermined. It's something we create together through our choices, our actions, and our unwavering belief in a better world. Until next time, keep diving deep.